Alright, and we're getting ready to put the piston back together now. So we've got our piston itself, got that all shined up, cleaned up best we can. So that's ready to go back together now. I've also cleaned out the threads here for this bolt that was missing to hold the wrist pin on. And that's ready to go. And then on the connecting rod, polished up this bronze bushing here, so it's nice and smooth. Won't have any problems. Also the wrist pin here has been polished up and rides nicely. Oh, my glove in there, rides nicely on that surface, so shouldn't have any problems with binding there anymore. Had to make a bit of a custom piece here. So there's actually a taper in this wrist pin to hold it in place, so I just took a bolt and ground it down a bit. So that'll let us connect it firmly to the piston. Also on the back side here, I showed you how gouged out this inner piece is. So this is actually a bushing of some kind. I think it's actually lead. So yeah, this is actually the other side. This one here was the one that was ground right down and had no X. I said I was going to hatch it out with a Dremel. I didn't even need to use a Dremel. I was just able to use like a sharp flathead screwdriver to reestablish that channel for the grease to run in. It's a very soft, I think it's lead. I think it's a hard lead. So yeah, we got our two bearing pieces ready to go back together. I also took out the oiler that was on here. So there was an oiler, and then it's here. So it turned out to be brass, really cool looking. So took that all apart. You can see the grease inside is just like disintegrated into crystallized powder stuff. So yeah, we'll put that back in there. Polish this up real nice. You guys probably can't see, but there's actually some lettering on it. It says Bolin Manufacturing Co. in Ashburn, New York, USA. So yeah, that's a pretty cool piece. It'll look nice bobbing back and forth on the connecting rod. So we'll get the last bit of this grease cleaned out, put it back into our connecting rod, get some new grease in there, fill the grease cup up, and put this bearing back together as well. So that'll look pretty nice. Oh yeah, we also got the rings polished up. So they're looking not too bad. A little bit of staining up here, but overall I'm pretty happy with that. So we'll get those put back together, and I'll show you when it's all ready to go. Okay, so we got that back together. You can see the rings installed, looking nice and shiny. Got our wrist pin reinstalled, along with the bolt to hold that in. This is nice and greased up. I put a bunch of grease in there just to get it started. And the grease cup's ready to go there. And then on this side, we've got our lead bushings reinstalled with a healthy coat of grease, as well as this brass oiler. And you can see when you crank the oiler down, we're getting a little spurt of grease come out of there. So that's ready to go, and we'll be putting that back in the engine soon. Next thing I want to put back together is this oiler. So this has a million little pieces in it, believe it or not. So I'll try to show you how this works real quick before I put it together. If I can just get all the pieces over here. There we are. So basically, this is the bottom portion here. So it's got a cork ring and a little a needle seat here. That's this needle here, which is going to control the rate of our oil going in there. It sits inside of this little brass tube when it does that, and that allows you to adjust this. This is your sort of on-off. That's off, and that's on, so it pulls it up. And then this is your fine-tuning for how fast the oil will drop in there. There's a few other interesting pieces, like a little cap for the top, and this keeper, which stops the adjustment screw from moving around too much. It's got a little mark on it to do that. And there's all kinds of little springs, and then that operation sits on top of this piece, which has a different little sight glass in it, and that lets you view how fast the oil is dripping down. I think you want about 10 drops per minute when this engine's running. So you would fine-tune the screw here until you can see about 10 drops a minute coming through the sight glass. So we'll get that all put back together and ready to go on the engine. Alright, and that is done. So you can see we got the oiler back together, got our sight tube here. So this seat, you can see there's no pressure on here because it's fully seated in there and stopping the oil. And then when we go to this mode, we can adjust that. We got our little fine tuner adjuster here. It was a little finicky to get together. This is spring loaded, you see. So I got that working nice, but that's a nice little feature as well. So happy to have that back together. I was paranoid the whole time I was going to lose parts or break this glass or something. So feeling a lot better about that. And we'll just put him off to the side for now. Next thing I'm going to tackle is this mixer here. So we lost one of the tubes. It's fully broken off. I'll either replace these lines with copper or maybe take it back together. I'm not sure yet. But I got this all sandblasted out. You can see it's a lot cleaner in here than it previously was. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. Good enough for what we're trying to get going anyways. So yeah, I'll get all the parts put back on this, and then I will show you that next. Okay, and here we have our mixer back together again. So you can see we've got the needle valve reinstalled. Basically just bottoms out in the back of this brass pickup tube and controls the amount of gas, or how rich the mixture is, if you will. That's actually how you shut down the engines, to turn that all the way, apparently. I've also got the brass plunger reinstalled. It's nice and smooth in there. So you can see how this would work when the linkage rod comes back, the same one that's opening the valves and firing the magneto. It comes back, it pulls on this, and that's what gives you your pumping action from this pickup tube here. And then remember, like I said, there's this broken off piece here. So what you would do is you'd wait for this to be in back position. You'd drop this down to about here, and it would stop here. And then now the rod, when it's coming back and actuating, it's not actually making the fuel pump move. So that lets you just run out of the bowl, start it on gas, and then once you're nice and started, you'd flip this up to there, and then your fuel pump would start working to pump out of the kerosene tank. So got that all together. I do need to cut a new gasket because this one's fried, but I'll use it as a template and get a new gasket cut, and this will be ready to reinstall. So next I'm going to throw together the governor and the magneto, or the plug igniter, and after that everything's ready to go back right on the engine. I'll be back with that. Okay, and now that I'm completely covered in grease, managed to get the governor back together. You can see how this works now. So this gear is turned by the cam gear. That will in turn cause these weights to swing out. The further they swing, the faster it goes. You can see here the preload screw. It puts pressure against this pin, and we can see that as we move these weights out, it pushes down that little rod coming out there, which is going to actuate our butterfly valve in the head. So that's the whole governor assembly, and ready to go back on the machine. Next I'm going to do the plug igniter. I'll show you that. Okay, and here's the plug igniter back together. Got the springs put in, and this little actuator, the cam actuator, installed. So you can see how that's going to work with this push rod here. It's going to come in. This little arm has a spring in it, which keeps it held up against this little thing here, and on this stroke it pushes the operation that way, and on the return stroke it pulls it that way. So it just basically oscillates this thing back and forth, a little bit this way, a little bit this way. Now if we had the governor, the magneto, it would be bolted on here, and the way that it worked is there was like a hoop shaped bar magnet, right? And it was a permanent magnet on the outside, and then inside is a coil of wire that would be rotated. So when this thing went 90 degrees that way or 90 degrees that way, it would flip that coil of wire back and forth inside of the permanent magnet, make a little bit of electricity, just a tiny little bit. But that was how that would work, in conjunction with how I showed you the points get opened here in a little condenser, which is just a capacitor built into the magneto. That would be enough to give you a spark. So I want to show you how we're going to get around that without having a magneto. So what I got here is a regular 12-volt car battery. I've just got some jumpers connected to that. You're positive, you're negative. So you can see if we connect those together, it's not that impressive, right? We're not getting a huge amount of spark here. If we rub it back and forth, there's maybe a tiny wisp, but nothing really spark-wise. So what we can do to improve that, if we were to wrap this around an iron core many times, like thousands of times, we could form an inductor, right? And that basically works by resisting the change in flux. So you charge it up with a short circuit, and then when you open that short, it still wants to maintain that field, so it's going to put power back out, basically like a rudimentary capacitor and resistor together, if you will. So what we're going to use in place of a iron core and a loop of wire is just this. So this is a standard automotive, sort of like your Chevy 350 coil, right? And the way that this works in a regular car is you got your positive, your negative. This would get turned on and on and on by the distributor, and that would induce like a very high voltage in the center contact, right? So there's like a primary coil, secondary coil. That's how this works. We're not going to use the secondary coil at all. We're just going to use this primary coil as our coil around a core. So I'm going to take the positive. It doesn't matter which, you can go 3 different ways with this wiring, but it's basically just connecting the positive from our battery to any terminal on here, and then we're going to come off of the other terminal here, and then that's going to be connected to the points on our plug igniter here. So to show you what that'll look like, if I run this back and forth, you can see, hopefully now, it pulling that little boost spark. And even a little more impressive, if we use a piece of iron here, you can see what it's doing. It doesn't do that with just a battery. You need the coil to make it work like that. So in operation, our one connection will be made to this center post here, which is again insulated with a mica insulator. This will be grounded out to anywhere on the engine, for example here. Oh, we lost our wire back there. Yeah, so for example, we'll put it on here for testing, and then what that'll do is you can see the sparks being thrown there. So every time this thing gets actuated and we break that connection, it's pretty hard to see in here, but there is a tiny baby little spark being pulled when that connection's broken. So that's going to be our ignition system for the engine, ready to go back on. And yeah, we're getting pretty close. I think we're going to start putting parts on, and we'll rebuild the head and valves when we get there. So I'll show you the next step.